Hello and welcome to Super Great Kids Stories, wise tales from storytellers around the world, which will make you laugh and sometimes cry. Recommended for ages 5 to 105. I'm Kim and I love stories. Hello, Super Great Kids, and how are you? I'm very happy because the days are long, the sun is shining, and I'm doing lots of swimming. Maybe that's why I've chosen a theme of water for this month. I thought it might keep anyone who's in a hot place a little cooler listening to watery stories. So, kicking off our new theme today is a water monster story from Wales. Wales is a beautiful country in the United Kingdom with the Irish Sea to the west and England to the east. It's got castles and mountains and rivers and lots of sheep. And it has a brilliant flag, green and white with a red dragon on it. The story today is just a teeny bit scary with a monster, so hold tight to a grown-up. The storyteller is Gillian Brownson, and she's a singing storyteller. Jill has done lots of travelling and finding stories along the way, and now she lives back in Wales, where she was raised among giants and dragons. Just before we hear from Jill, I've got a question for you. Would you rather live in the sea like a mermaid, in a lake like the Loch Ness Monster, in a river like an eel, or in a cave like the two-headed giant? Oh, and why would you rather live in that place? Have a think about it while we have a quick word with the grown-ups. Ready? Off you go. Hello, Super Great Kids, I'm back. Which watery place did you decide you'd prefer to live in? I think I'd like to live under the sea because of all the bright colours, and there are so many weird and wonderful creatures to make friends with down there. How about you? Now, it's time to meet our new storyteller. Let's give a warm welcome to Gillian Brownson.
Hello, Super Great Kids. I'm Jill, and I love stories just like you. Many of my favourite stories are the old tales from in and around the place where I come from. I live in Wales, which is a small country in the United Kingdom. My home is on an island called Holyhead. I'm bringing you a story all about a river beast today. It's a very famous story here in Wales, in the UK where I live. Have you ever looked up into the night sky and looked for patterns in the stars? If you look really closely, you can see shapes like people and animals. And this story is all about the Taurus star, which looks a little bit like an ox or a bull in the night sky. Like lots of my stories, you might hear as well a little bit of Welsh. So I like to start and end my stories with Welsh phrases. I start with amser maith yn ôl. It means a long time ago, or once upon a time. And I end with a dyna ni ar y diwedd, which means, and here we are at the end. I hope you enjoy it. Amser maith yn ôl. In a world very different to our own, the people who were living along the banks of the River Conway up in North Wales were being faced with the same terrible event every year. Every winter, the river would burst its banks, with water gushing everywhere, flooding the fields and ruining the crops, even tearing down people's houses. It was so awful that the people of the valley wondered whether they should leave. But when they looked at their green and lovely valley, so close to the sea and all it gave them, well, they didn't want to leave their home. They wanted to stay. You might think that these terrible floods were caused by the winter rains. But everyone in the valley knew that, in fact, they were caused by a mysterious creature who was said to dwell high up in a deep lake at the top of the valley, which fed the River Conway. The lake was called Llyn yr Afanc, which means Lake of the Beaver. But this creature, who the people called the Afanc, was so much more than a lowly beaver. It was a gigantic beast, like a serpent, with a head and teeth of a crocodile, and scales like a dragon, with skin as tough as iron. And when it became frightened or angry, it was strong enough to break the banks of the lake and cause the water to flood down through the valley. And it was this that was the cause of so many people's worries. Many brave men had travelled up to the lake with spears and swords and arrows, but there was no weapon strong enough to pierce through the Avanc's tough skin, and so the floods continued year after year. Eventually, the wise men and the women of the valley held a gathering, a meeting. They talked for hours, trying to decide what could be done about this menacing creature that was ruining their homes. And in the end, it was decided that if their weapons wouldn't work, the only thing to do would be to somehow move the monster to a new lake, away from their homes, where it could cause no more trouble. Now, there was such a place, a perfect place, up near the remote mountain of Yr Wyddfa, or Snowdon, the tallest mountain in Wales. The Avanc's new home was to be Llyn y Ffynnon Las, or the Lake of the Blue Well, where nobody lived for miles around. The monster would be alone and cause no more trouble. But how were they to move such a massive monster? Well, the finest blacksmith in all of Wales was called to forge the giant iron chains which would bind the beast's claws when it was captured. But no ordinary horse or ox would be able to pull this monster and its chains out of the lake up to its remote new home. So they sent for a brave hero whose name was Hugh Gadarn, and who had in his possession 2 giant long-horned oxen, the Ychan Banog. They were legendary, the mightiest of all oxen, huge animals who would have the strength to pull this monster and its chains out of the lake up to its new home. Now, everything was ready, but there was one problem. How were they going to get the Afanc out of his lake in order to put it in the chains and hitch it to the 2 mighty oxen? Well, there was only one way. The Afanc, though monstrous, was like so many others, mesmerised and calmed by music. And so, a 14-year-old girl, the daughter of a local farmer who was known far and wide to sing like a bird, was asked to sing the monster out of the lake. And she was brave enough to say yes. It was she who would entice the Afanc up to its new home. So, when all was ready, on a calm and still afternoon, the girl slowly approached the Avanc's lake. Her father and the rest of the men of the valley all stayed hidden a short distance away behind the trees and the rocks. Hugh Gadarn and the 2 giant oxen were in the next field, with the giant iron chains trailing, hidden in the long grass. The girl sat down on the grass, looked out towards the calm lake, and she began to sing. A song she'd heard from her mother many times, a song in her own language of Welsh. Dacwn hariad I lawr yn y berllan, twr di roar di raddle diddle dal. But there was nothing. The water stayed still, so she carried on. Ona bawn I yna fy hunan, twr di roar di raddle diddle dal. Well, at that moment, the waters on the surface began to slowly churn, and through them the huge head of the monster appeared, with green-black eyes staring right at her. She wanted to turn and run as quick as she could, back to her father, but the girl bravely stayed, knowing only she could raise it from the lake. So, gazing fiercely back into the monster's eyes, she continued to sing. Dacwr tia, dacwr skipwr, dacwr ddrws y beidyn agor. Fal di raddle diddle dal, fal di raddle diddle dal, twr di roar di raddle diddle dal. And slowly the great body of the Afanc crawled out of the llyn towards the girl. So sweet was the song that the Afanc did not attack. He simply approached her, and to her utter disbelief, the monster simply placed his head gently in her lap and fell to sleep. She even dared to stroke his scales as she hummed. And when the Afanc had fallen into a very deep sleep, she signalled to her father that it was time. And he signalled to Hugh Gadarn and the rest of the men, who all came from their hiding places and started gently binding the Afanc in chains. They had only just finished their task when the Afanc suddenly awoke. It saw the girl, who had been singing so sweetly, run away and hide behind the trees. And then it became aware of the men who were about its claws, binding it in chains so it couldn't move. It roared with fury as it realised it had been tricked, and quickly attempted to jump back into the safety of its lakes. But the chains were too strong, and Hugh Gadarn had been quick to secure them onto the two huge oxen. He gave a sharp whip to the animals, and they braced their muscles and began to heave the creature from the lake, away from its home, the only place it had ever known. Slowly, the Afanc was dragged from the shore of the lake, but it took the strength of the two ox and every available man to pull him off the bank and up into the fields. With the creature roaring and screaming in chains, the oxen then dragged it up the Lledr Valley, past the villages and fields that had seen all the terrible floods, and then they continued for miles northwest towards Snowdon and the Lake of the Blue Well. On the way up, in a steep mountain field, one of Hugh Gadarn's ox was pulling so hard as the creature flailed and roared behind it that he had to stop to rest. The Afanc, angry and frustrated, took his chance and struck the tired ox with its tail, killing it instantly, leaving only one remaining ox to finish the job alone. After crying over the body of its friend, the ox's tear formed a new lake in the land. Pwll llygaid yr ych, the pool of the ox's eye. But it wasn't far enough away from the people of the valley, and so they had to continue on, up the mountain to the remote lake. Hugh Gadarn, and now just one of his ox, all alone, struggled on until they finally reached the Lake of the Blue Well, close to the summit of Snowdon. There, the chains of the Afanc were finally broken, and with a roar the monster leapt straight into the deep blue water that was to become his new home. Encased within the sturdy rock banks of the lake, some believe that the Afanc remains there still. And on a clear night, you can also see the shape of the ox who died up in the stars as Taurus, shining down over the lake and still watching over the imprisoned monster, keeping the people of the Conway Valley safe forevermore. But every story must have its end. A dyna ni, at y diwedd. Which means, and here we are at the end. Dacwn hariad I lawr yn y berllan, tŵr di roar di rattle diddle dal. Honna bawn I yna fy hunan, tŵr di roar di rattle diddle dal.
Oh, thank you so much, Jill, for sharing that story. Were you a bit scared? Was your grown-up scared? Do you think you could draw a picture of the Afanc coming up out of the water to listen to that music with its head and teeth like a crocodile and its scales like a dragon and, well, you can imagine the rest. Would you have volunteered to be the person to sing to it? Nope, me neither. I think I'd be too scared to sing. And now, it's time to say hello to some owlets who've recently flopped into our nest. Let's start in the sunny state of Iowa in the Midwest of the US to hoot hello to new owlet Adriana, who is 6. Her favourite story is The Ghost of the Bloody Finger. Do you know, Adriana, I cycled across your state once on an organised bike ride. It was the first time my children had been to the US, and it was a lovely introduction to your country. Do you know, it was so good that we returned and did it again another year. Up to Eagle River in Alaska next to say hello to dedicated story fans, the Smith family, who've been listening to Super Great Kids stories for several years. The oldest, Eloise, who is 5, is a particularly big fan. Her favourite story is River Mama. I wonder if you have mermaids in Alaska, Eloise. I expect you do. Across to North Carolina in the US next to say hello to Nella, who became an owlet for her 5th birthday. Nella loves all the Anansi stories, and she and her little brother Emmy enjoy listening while they're travelling. Nella is very excited to listen to all the scary stories and find out what all the fuss is about with the Ghost of the Bloody Finger. It's actually not too scary, Nella. It's a sort of scary not scary story. I think you'll be fine. And let's head up to Maine in the US next to greet owlets Finn, who is 10, and Rye, who is 6. They love all the stories with animals and recently enjoyed The Rainbow Bird. They often listen to the podcast while drawing or playing Lego. Good idea. And let's head west now to Austin in Texas to say hello to Isaac, who is 7, and his little sister Ava, who is 3. Isaac says he loves all the stories. Well, that's very nice to hear, Isaac. Thank you. That's put a wag in my tail. A big hoot next to Alina, who is 6. Alina lives in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and she especially loved Finn McCool and the 7 Little Helpers. Ah, yes, the wonderful storyteller Kate Corkery. She's so good, isn't she? And let's head across the pond to Hackney in London next to say a big hoo-hoo-hoo to Mila, who is 4.5. She particularly enjoys listening to the stories while visiting her grandparents in Slovakia and her grandma in France. Lucky you, Mila, having many different cultures in your family. Mila's favourites are the Baba Yaga stories about Vasilisa and Masha, and the whole family just loves the Hodges party clothes. And hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo to superfans and new owlets Sammy and Bo, who are 9 and 6. Sammy and Bo are Irish and Swedish, and they moved from Ireland to Sweden about 1.5 years ago. That sounds like a winning combination. Lots of stories in your house, I imagine. Welcome to the club, both of you. Well, that's it for Owlet Hellos this week. More next week. And thanks very much to all of you owlets who are subscribing to our podcast. If you'd like to support us on Apple Podcasts or on Patreon, we'll say hello to you on the programme. You can hear our stories advert-free, and you'll get access to our Super Great Kids Stories Express. Great for long journeys, listening to back-to-back stories with very little kimbabble. And you'll have access to over 40 bonus stories and at least 24 Super Great Scary Stories. For more information, go to our website at supergreatkidsstories.com. And it's the bonus and scary story week this week, so if you're an owlet, look out for Samuel's Ghost and the Little Louse. And there are so many good pictures being sent into our Facebook page at the moment. It's very hard to choose, but our pick of the week pictures are a genius picture of Inch Boy clutching his toothpick sword while inside the stomach of the Red Ogre. It's drawn by 7-year-old Ellis from Indiana. Really good, Ellis. Well done. And 5-year-old Caspian from Melbourne in Australia has sent in a fabulous picture of the Jamaican mermaid River Mama. It's got glitter and blue waves cut out of blue paper and lots of sparkly hair and a huge smile. Just lovely and fits perfectly with our watery theme. Thank you, Caspian. If you'd like to see these super great pics and lots more, go to facebook.com/supergreatkidsstories. That's it for now. Hoo, 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 hoo. Happy holidays. Keep telling your stories and singing your songs. This podcast was produced at Wardour Studios in fabulous Fitzrovia in London.
Hi, I'm Alexis Ohanian. You may know me as one of the co-founders of Reddit, but more recently, a large part of my identity is being a father to my wonderful daughters. In my podcast, Business Dad, I hope to open the conversation about working parents a bit. You'll get to hear from a wide range of business dads, from Rainn Wilson and Guy Raz to Todd Carmichael and Shane Battier, to find out how they balance being a dad with a successful career. Business Dad is available now, so be sure to listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.